Hi learners! Again, I'm Ma'am Strawberry C. Versosa or Ma'am Straw. For today's lesson, we are going to discuss biodiversity. The most essential learning competencies for this lesson are explain how species diversity increases the probability of adaptation and survival of organisms in changing environment, and explain the relationship between population growth and carrying capacity. Okay, let's start. In our previous lesson, you have learned how evolution through natural selection can result in biodiversity. In this lesson, you will learn how biodiversity can influence the stability of an ecosystem, the relationship between population growth and carrying capacity of a specific environment. And also, you will become aware of the different human activities that have a negative impact on the environment. Biodiversity describes how varied are life forms in different ecosystems. The Philippines is known for its very rich biodiversity. According to an article published in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, DENR, 2014 website, the country has more than 52,177 described species, of which more than half is found nowhere else in the world. On a per unit area basis, the Philippines probably harbors more diversity of life than any other country. But our country is also considered as biodiversity hotspot. This is because our country is continuously experiencing an alarming rate of environmental destruction like damage of coral reefs, forests, and other similar important resources. Do you know how important biodiversity is? You will find out as we go on in this lesson. So what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is a term that describes how varied living things are in a specific area. How many kinds of living things can be found in your community? Think about a place in your community and try to identify organisms that can be found in your locality and are valuable to your life. And why do you consider those organisms important to you? Organisms are part of biodiversity and may be economically and ecologically valuable. Their products are source of food, medicine, clothing, shelter, and energy. These organisms are also important in maintaining the balance in the ecosystem as they perform their specific roles. Some species maintain the quality of natural bodies of water. Some prevent soil erosion and floods, cycle minerals in the soil and absorb pollutants. Others feed on insects and pests which control the population of organisms in a certain environment, thus making an ecosystem balanced and stable. The value of species can be divided into various categories. These are direct economic value, indirect economic value, and aesthetic value. So let us differentiate the three. First is direct economic value. When we say direct economic value, the species is considered to have a direct economic value if their products are sources of food, medicine, clothing, shelter, and energy. So for example, some medicines being used nowadays have formulation extracted from plants or animals. Next one is indirect economic value. A species has an indirect economic value if there are benefits produced by the organism without using them. So for example, certain species maintain the chemical quality of natural bodies of water, prevent soil erosion and floods, cycle materials in the soil, and absorb pollutants. And we have aesthetic value. A lot of species provide visual or artistic enjoyment, like the landscape and the calming beauty of the natural park. Or they may be used for spiritual meditation, like prayer mountains. Now it's your turn to classify the value of biodiversity in an ecosystem. This will help you appreciate more the importance of the living things found in your community. Then try to think about how you can help conserve them. So let's have our learning task number 1, classifying the value of biodiversity. List down the value of organisms, then classify their values by putting a star on the space under the correct column. So let's have 3 as an example. So the values of trees are freshen air with indirect economic value, provide shade with indirect economic value, and source of lumber with direct economic value. So your task is to list down the values of flowers and oregano plant. Okay, are you done? So let's proceed. Biodiversity is very important because it sustains through flow of energy the food web on Earth and contributes to environmental stability. Stability of an ecosystem can be described as the resilience to withstand changes that may occur in the environment. There are many changes that occur in the environment which may be a result of natural or human activities. These changes may severely reduce biodiversity and result to instability of ecosystem. Since you now know the importance of biodiversity, let us learn how the population of organisms in an ecosystem affects biodiversity. Relationship between population growth and carrying capacity. Population is a group of organisms of the same species that live in a certain area. Ecologists regularly monitor the number of organisms in many populations. But why do they do this? Why should we care if the number of organisms in an area is decreasing or increasing? Well, populations that are growing or diminishing can be indicators of potential problems in the organism's environment. And such conditions alarm the ecologists if something is going wrong. But it is not enough to simply know if the number of organisms in an area is increasing or decreasing. Ecologists need to know why the number of organisms is decreasing. So one of the main questions ecologists ask themselves is, why is a population size increasing or decreasing? There are many factors that can cause a population size to change. But first, you must understand the basic reasons behind why a population increases or decreases. Any population, whether it be that of humans, animals, the molds growing on the bread, or the bacteria living on your intestine, will grow if more organisms are being developed or born than are dying. The number of births in a population is called birth rate or natality, while the number of organisms that are dying in a population is called death rate or mortality. Also, we have the immigration. Immigration is the transfer of individuals from one population to another population. For example, due to lack of supply or the climate and the weather condition. Next one is the emigration. Emigration is a transfer of individuals out of the population and into another. Emigration occurs when a population approaches its carrying capacity. An individual organism leave and go to a new area where they can find enough resources for survival and reproduction. This will obviously cause a decrease in the amount of organisms in a population. Thus, if the birth rate is greater than death rate, a population will grow. But if the death rate is greater than the birth rate, then the population will decrease. While populations will probably to continue to grow in size, population of organisms cannot grow forever. Its growth will be limited or stop at some point. At the death rate will be greater than the birth rate. A population's growth is limited by two general factors. These are density-independent factors and density-dependent factors. To understand why scientists name these factors in the way they do, you must first understand the concept of population density. Population density refers to the number of organisms per unit area. If a population's density is very high, that means there are a lot of organisms crowded into a certain area. But if a population's density is low, that means there are very few organisms in a area. So let us discuss the two limiting factors. If the population's density does not directly influence changes in the population's growth, then this is called a density-independent limiting factor. And also, these are the limiting factors that can stop a population from growing can be such things as natural disasters, temperature, sunlight, and the activities of humans in the environment. Natural disasters such as tropical cyclones, flood, earthquakes, and fire will stop a population from growing no matter how many organisms are living in a certain area. The same goes for the temperature of an area and the amount of sunlight it receives. If the temperature increases due to global warming, it will cause a decrease in a population's number, no matter how large or small the population was to begin with. Human activities that alter the environment will also decrease the number of organisms in a population, regardless of the size of the population. Next one is the density-dependent factors. These are the factor that regulates a population's growth and is influenced by population's density. Also, these are the factors come into play when a population reaches a certain number of organisms. So for example, when a population reaches a certain size, there won't be enough resources like food, shelter, water for all. This could cause the population to stop growing when it reaches the maximum number of organisms that can be supported or carried by an environment. This number is known as the population's carrying capacity in a particular environment. Each population of organism has a different carrying capacity, depending on the amount of resources available in the area in which it lives. Carrying capacity refers to the number of individuals who can be supported in a given area within natural resource limits and without degrading the natural, social, cultural, and economic environment for present and future generations. Before a population reaches its carrying capacity, it experiences a period of rapid growth. This period of growth is called exponential population growth. During this period, there are plenty of resources available for all organisms, so more births are recorded than deaths in organisms. When resources are unlimited, populations exhibit exponential growth resulting in J-shaped curve. When resources are limited, population exhibit logistic growth. In logistic growth, population expansion decreases as the resources become scarce as it levels off when the carrying capacity of environment is reached, resulting in a S-shaped curve. So for your next activity, learning task number 2, study the chart about the habitat where cow population has reached its carrying capacity and answer the following question. So study this chart and try to answer the following question. Question number 1, what is carrying capacity? Number 2, what have you noticed with the population of cow between May and June? Okay, are you done? Okay, great. Let's proceed. Learning task number 3. You are going to write an essay that will explain the importance of biodiversity in adaptation and survival of organisms. So this is the rubrics for your essay. Quality of writing, grammar, usage, and mechanics. For learning task number 4, multiple choice. Choose the letter of the correct answer based on what you have learned in this lesson. Question number 1. It is a group of organisms in a certain area. A. Population. B. Carrying capacity. C. Density dependent factors. D. Density independent factors. For question number 2, it refers to the number of individuals who can be supported in each area within natural resources limits. A. Population. B. Carrying capacity. C. Density dependent factors. D. Density independent factors. Question number 3. These are the limiting factors that can stop population from growing can be such things as natural disasters, temperature, sunlight, and the activities of human in the environment. A. Population. B. Carrying capacity. C. Density dependent factors. D. Density independent factors. Question number 4. These are the factors that come into play when population reaches a certain number of organisms. A. Population. B. Carrying capacity. C. Density dependent factors. D. Density independent factors. And lastly, we have question number 5. It describes how varied our life form in different ecosystems. A. Biochemistry. B. Biodiversity. C. Biology. D. Botany. And for our reflection, please complete the following sentences. I understand that. I realize that. I need to learn more about. I hope you learned something from our discussion. And for our references, we have Science 10 Learners Material pages 328 to 347. And also we have Pivot for a Learner's Packet or LEAP. Special thanks to Melody C. and How, Nicanor O. Reyes II, and Jocelyn M. Manset. And also we have our Canva for the templates of our presentation. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you and God bless.